Prudent Scholars in association with Goa Headmasters Association.
Welcome on board to the virtual learning class in geography. You will surely be apprehensive, stressed about your studies given the current situation. But be excited too, as you are the first batch with this privilege. Remember to embrace challenges rather than avoid them. So here we go with the first lesson, resources and development. This lesson has been divided into two parts. The first, resources and development, where we learn up to land resources. In the second part, we shall study about soil as a resource. The first part, as you can see on the slide, is divided into 7 parts. Let us begin. We first need to study about the definition of resources. A resource is a material which is found in nature and it is used to satisfy our need. It has like a 3-legged stool, 3 very important legs, which mean that it should first be technologically accessible, economically feasible, and culturally acceptable. We shall learn about these in the next slide, but before that, we need to know that human beings too are an essential resource because they transform the material from the environment into resources and use them. Here comes the meaning of the definition. The first place we have got technologically accessible, which means that we need technology to utilize the resources that we have. Man has recognized so many resources, but if we do not have the technical know-how, there is no way these can be resources. So as you can see in the picture, we have got a lot of forest, there is wind energy, there is mineral oil and so many other materials which, if not tapped, if not technologically accessible, they cannot be termed as resources. We need economically feasibility. What does that mean? A resource to be economically feasible means that we must have enough of money to extract it or to make use of it as a resource. For example, here we have mineral oil. From the beginning, we require an infrastructure, institution, we require, besides the raw material, we require the technology, we require the money to pump in order to be able to extract it and use it as a resource. Culturally acceptable, the third leg of the stool is culturally acceptable. It means that people must accept this resource and they should feel the need of it. It should be required as a need. And this will be used then without hindrance, respecting all the traditions of the people. For example, we've got timber, solar energy, biomass, etc. How do we define these resources? I have made things a little easy for you. Resources are classified on the basis of origin, exhaustibility, ownership and status. We have got 2 O's and an E and an S. Origin, exhaustibility, ownership and the status of development. Resources basically are natural and they could also be human made. Natural resources are renewable and the non-renewable ones. We have studied about these in the previous classes as well. Renewable resources are the ones that are continuous, like wind, water, etc. Renewable resources are also biological because they can be obtained again and again, and these are plants and wildlife, or the vegetation and wildlife. We also term them as flora and fauna. While on the human side, the resources that we make can be structures and institutions, as mentioned earlier. Also, we have resources which have a certain quality and quantity which we need to determine. Sometimes these resources are recyclable while others may not be. Let's come to the classification of resources. The first O was origin. Now, resources are classified on the basis of their origin. How were they formed? We have biotic and abiotic, which you are familiar with as well. The biotic resources are obtained from the biosphere and they have life, while the abiotic, they are composed of non-living things. As you can see in the picture, we have got the living and the non-living things. Next is exhaustibility. Do they get over? Can they be renewed? Can we obtain them back again? You are not unfamiliar with these terms as well. Renewable resources. These are resources which can be renewed or reproduced by some physical, chemical or a mechanical process. And non-renewable resources are the ones that take millions of years to form, a long geological period of time. So we have to be very judicious when we use these resources, like minerals and fossil fuels. The other O is ownership. Resources are owned. So who owns them? There are 4 sections of people or statuses that own them. For example, the first is individual resources. Now, these are privately owned resources. These could also be leased by the government on the payment of a revenue. These include house, orchard, ponds, wells, etc. Community owned resources are the resources which are available to all members of the community, irrespective of status and whatever else. And some examples of such resources are burial grounds, grazing grounds, playgrounds, to name a few. We next have national and international resources. Now, as the name suggests, national, it has got to do something with India or with each nation. All resources within the political boundary of India or any other country for that matter, like minerals, water, forest, wildlife and land. And how much of land? Up to 12 nautical miles. That means 19.2 kilometers from the coast. You can see this. This whole land area and all the resources available within this area belong to India. And you can remember 12 nautical miles, 12 is a hint for 1 dozen. So this is an easier number to remember. While international resources. Now, there are certain international institutions which regulate some resources. If you look at this map of the world that I have put, the dark blue lines indicate the 12 nautical miles for every country. And the light blue is what belongs to everybody else. It is an international institution. So, beyond this 200 kilometers is something known as the exclusive economic zone. All the oceanic resources within this zone beyond the 200 kilometers belong to no individual country, and no resources from here can be utilized by any country without the consensus of this international institute. Next, the S comes for the status of development. Now, all the resources that we have found need to be developed, right? So, how much have we developed these resources? Now, these resources are of 4 types. One is said to be potential, developed, stock and reserves. Potential resources are resources which are found in the region, but they haven't yet been utilized. They are there, but they are not utilized, maybe because we are already using some of these. We need to keep them for some other time. like wind and solar energy in western Rajasthan and Gujarat. Only a part of it is being used, or part of the states are being used for tapping these energy resources. What are developed resources? Resources which are found in a region, their quality and quantity which is already determined for usage, and we are already using them, like dams, mineral oils, coal, we are already using these. We have got so many rivers, but all the rivers are not dammed. So, we still have the potential of developing this resource on the other rivers. Mineral oil, we have got large deposits of mineral oil. So, there is a lot of potential that these can be developed. Next, we have stock. What is stock? Resources that have the potential to satisfy the human need, but we do not have the technology to access this as yet. I have given you a hint. S&T stands for they are able to satisfy human needs, but we do not have the technology to use them because they may be a little deeper into the earth, or for whatever reasons we haven't been able to find a technology to access these resources. So, these are said to be stocks. And reserves are the resources that have the potential to satisfy human need, fine, but what? We have the technical know-how, but their use hasn't been started. These are like how you have reserves in a game, in a match. You have the reserves. In case you need to use them, you will use the reserved player. In the same manner, resources that have the potential, we have the technical know-how, but they are not yet being utilized. For example, as I had mentioned earlier, the river water for the generation of hydroelectricity. The fourth point we come to is development of resources. How have we been able to develop these resources? See, resources are free gifts of nature to mankind. So, they need to be used very judiciously if we want them to last for a long time. So, what must we do? We should not deplete resources for the greed of a few individuals. Mahatma Gandhi had said, there is enough for everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed. So, greed is something we should do away with when it comes to usage of resources. Second, accumulation of resources in the hands of few divide the society into haves and have-nots. So, we mustn't do this at all. So, these resources should not divide society into haves and have-not. What do I mean by this? Let me give you an example. If we have a small hamlet of houses that have their water supply from the local well, and if you see that a few years later a big construction or some buildings come close to this place, you will see that the groundwater of this well, or the level of water in this well, will reduce because there is already water being pumped by the pumping devices used in that colony of houses. So, these people, the original inhabitants, will be deprived of water and they will fall into a situation of have-nots, while the others will be in a situation of have. So, this should not divide, because water and all other resources of the country are meant for everybody. There is no discrimination whatsoever. Resources should not be indiscriminately used, leading to global crisis. As we can all see, we are all a part of the crisis already going on, like global warming and the climatic change that we refer to, the ozone depletion, the effects of which are still not felt seriously, pollution. This lockdown has enabled us to see how much of less pollution we have created. Extinction of plant and animal species. Even if we go to the wildlife sanctuaries and the national parks, we are not going to see certain animals and plants that are already extinct. Resources found in different countries should sustain the quality of life. It should sustain the quality, not make anybody superior or inferior. And resource planning will lead to sustainable existence. The fifth point we study is resource planning need of the hour. Now, different states are endowed with different resources. Not all states are equipped with all the resources. So, that is what makes it nice that we can share our resources. Some regions are rich in certain resources while others are insufficient in them, or they may even have an acute shortage of vital resources. We have the states of Madhya Pradesh, Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh that have abundant mineral and coal deposits. You can see a lot of mineral and coal deposits here. Look at this. This is the map of Arunachal Pradesh. See the amount of rivers that crisscross the land. Arunachal Pradesh has abundant water resources, but they lack the infrastructure to develop them. If you can see the small dots on the rivers, these are supposed to be dams which are being planned for construction. So, this is a reserve. This water is a reserve for development of hydroelectricity. Rajasthan, on the other hand, is endowed with solar and wind energy, but as you know, it is a desert area, so it lacks water resources. Ladakh is very rich in culture and it attracts a lot of tourists, but lacks water, minerals and infrastructure. So, how do we plan resources? Resource planning in India is done in the following ways. First, we need to identify the resources. Next, we need to have an inventory of them by surveying, mapping, determining the quality and the quantity. Evolving a planning structure. How are we going to plan and execute the removal of this resource, the utilization of this resource, the use of this resource without being wasted? And the third is matching the resource development plans with the overall national development plan. Is it going to meet the requirements of a few sections, a big section of the society? So, all this has to be seriously taken into consideration when we plan the use of any resource. Let's come to the sixth point, land as a resource. We take land for granted so much that these points will help you to ponder upon land as a resource. What is the use of land? First, it is the habitat of man. All economic activities are performed on land. The soil covered is essential for plant growth. Therefore, land is necessary for agriculture. Land is used to set up industrial units. Roadways, railways, houses are built on land. Commercial activities also require land. Natural vegetation and wildlife are all supported by land. So, land is a very important resource. How is India's land divided into? Basically, it is divided into mountains, plateaus and plain. You can see the pie chart. We have about 43% of our land as mountains, 30 about as plateaus and 27 as plains. What is the use of the mountain? You have studied in the earlier classes that mountains are the source of rivers. The tributaries that bring down their waters all contribute in the formation of rivers. So, the perennial flow of rivers originates in the mountains. Besides, mountains also provide a lot of tourism facilities for the people and for the visitors. Plateaus, these are rich reserves of minerals, fossil fuels and forests. So, a lot of fauna is also found over here. Plains, these provide a space for agriculture, industry, urbanization and all other developmental projects which are required for the people. We see that forest land, the forest land in any country, at least in India, is stipulated to be at least 33% of the geographical land. So, in order to make this compulsory, a national forest policy had been outlined in the year 1952, first to maintain the ecological balance and to protect the livelihood of millions of forest dwellers who depend on this land for their survival. How do we make use of this land? Are there any factors by which we need to really, which help us to use the land for a specific purpose? And it is yes, there are certain factors that contribute to usage of land, like use of land depends on the topography or the physical features, climate, soil types, population density, technology, culture and traditions. Depending on all these factors, we may use the land either for housing, for cattle rearing, for recreation and what have you. The pie chart tells us very clearly how much of land is utilized for what purpose. We see that this area is forested, so quite a big area of our land is forested, and this in green is the net sown area. This is the area that we cultivate. So in the country we cultivate a lot of land. Basically India is an agrarian society. What about this? This is land put to non-agricultural use. So it can be for housing, industry, road, railway, whatever else. This yellow is said to be cultivable waste. This is wasteland which is not cultivated, but it could be used for cultivation if we need to extend agriculture a little more. The purple is fallow other than the current fallow land. This is left fallow, not utilized, not cultivated for a long period of time. Current fallow land, for whatever reasons this strip of land or the amount of land over here is not cultivated, maybe because it is expensive or whatever else. Pasture land in India is decreasing and it is posing a great threat to feeding our cattle. The current fallow land is of poor quality, making it very expensive for agriculture. So that is why it is left fallow. Some part of our land is termed as wasteland because it is rocky, it is arid, desert, it could be used for settlement, roadways, railways and for industrial use. And the last point is land degradation. How does land get degraded? First of all, we have got a lot of human activities. First, deforestation. You can see how much of land, there is a landslide here because there is no tree cover. Overgrazing, you will not find any trees growing because there is soil erosion taking place here because of overgrazing. We have mining, the deep scars that form due to mining. Quarrying, removal of stone for construction or even for minerals. These are some the most dangerous human activities that contribute to land degradation. Let us see these factors, how they affect different states. You will see that in the states of Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh and Orissa, mining leaves deep scars and traces of overburdening. Overgrazing has led to land degradation in Rajasthan, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra. In the states of Punjab, Haryana and West Uttar Pradesh, over-irrigation leading to waterlogging, which results in the salinity and the alkalinity of the land, has contributed to land degradation in Punjab. Quarrying of minerals and its processing makes water impervious. So the water along with the soil cover just flows down. Discharge of industrial effluents on land contributes to land degradation as well as water pollution. So how can we check land degradation? There are certain ways or methods by which we can check it. First, afforestation or planting of trees, control and proper management of grazing grounds, control of mining activities, plan proper discharge of industrial effluents, proper management of wastelands, and stabilization of sand dunes by growing thorny bushes. We finish with the first part of the two-part of this lesson. I have got some questions for you for assessment which you can take down.